Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the To-Do List. I'm your host, Eric Fisher. This week, I get to speak about slowing your home. Why would you want to go slow? Slow means the opposite of productivity, right? Maybe not. I get to talk to Brooke MCalary of Slow Your Home. And yes, that was my attempt to do an Aussie accent, as Brooke is from the Down Under. We talk about very much this whole idea of sanctuary and slowing yourself down and doing intentional actions, as well as using your best tips, tricks, productivity hacks, all that kind of stuff to get the most done that you can in the limited amount of time that you have, especially when it comes to family. I think you're really going to like this one. I know I did. Thank you to MailChimp for sponsoring this episode. MailChimp is the tool you need to manage all your email newsletter needs. In fact, one of the coolest things that we use for the Beyond the To-Do List podcast is the cool tool that they have that turns your RSS feed, any kind of RSS feed for that matter, into a newsletter itself. So what you can do is you can plug an RSS feed like I have for my show, Beyond the To-Do List, and MailChimp will pull each new post from that RSS feed, and it will turn it into an email newsletter for you. All you have to do is pick out your template, and you're good to go. In fact, you can sign up for ours if you just head over to beyondthetodolist.com, and you can set this up for yourself by using MailChimp by going over to beyondthetodolist.com/MailChimp. It is an awesome tool to get that new notification of your new podcast, your new blog post, your new content entry insert name here into the hands of your listeners, your readers, your video watchers, etc. Again, go to beyondthetodolist.com/MailChimp. That's where you can find that. That's where you can tell them I sent you. Again, beyondthetodolist.com/MailChimp. Thanks again to MailChimp for sponsoring this episode of Beyond the To-Do List. Welcome back to Beyond the To-Do List. This week, I get to talk to somebody who's talking to me from the future. You'll understand that in a second. It's Brooke MCalary from Australia. Welcome to the show, Brooke.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to be here.
So we're talking, and it's about 3:15 my time on a Tuesday, but to you, it's 5:15 a.m. in the morning on Wednesday. So
that's right.
How's the future look?
The future looks good.
Good. I've wanted to have you on the show for a while. Your site, Slow Your Home, which I can't say without thinking of Adam Sandler saying "Go to your home" from Happy Gilmore. Sorry, I said I wasn't going to say it, and I said it anyway.
I'm so glad you said it.
I can't think of it. Slow your home. Slow Your Home is such a weird URL, but it's so appropriate. So what is a slow home?
It is a weird URL, you're right. But a slow home, it's a few things, but it's typically a home that is relatively clutter-free, a home that works. The important thing is that it works for the people who live there rather than you having to work for your home. And it also, it's tied up with sort of the eco-friendly side of things as well. It's a home that's part of a community. It's a real holistic kind of approach to how we live.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I feel like you're saying that your home is not just a building. It's more than that. Does that sound right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I've actually written before about how home doesn't necessarily need to be a house or a building at all. It can just be a feeling or a mindset or, a caravan or, a boat. I feel like the slow part of it comes in to play when you look at what most of us tend to do in life, which is rush around from one thing to the next. And we never get a chance to just sit and be present and mindful. So the slow side of it comes into play when we take that time to just stop in the present moment.
So it's not just like a home is not just a location. The thought I get is it's almost like a sanctuary in a sense, but not
Definitely.
Not sanctuary in the sense of, oh, it's so sacred, don't touch anything. It can be messy and it can be familiar, but it's still sacred at the same time. Does that make sense?
Exactly. That makes perfect sense.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people get caught up in the whole idea of it needing to be, this white minimalist box kind of house. And that's not really it at all. It's about surrounding yourself with things that matter and things that you love and things that have memories attached. And I mean, I am personally quite a minimalist, but my kids aren't. So.
I don't think any kids are minimalists, honestly.
No.
So what do you think of that word? Like, I know you just said that you prescribe to that thought process, but is it about simplicity? What is it about minimalism? Again, how do you have that clash of, well, you're a minimalist, or you at least like it or think that that's a good thing to do to an extent, but your kids aren't. How do you do that?
It's hard, actually. It's taken me quite a few years. My kids are only young as well. They're only 5 and 3. So it's taken me really since my eldest, my daughter was born, to start to readjust, my thoughts on that kind of stuff. Because before we had kids, we just didn't have to think about it. We just did what we did and it was fine. But now we have 2 very small and lovely tyrants, sharing our home. So it's a matter of compromise as well, but also priorities. I find having our priorities aligned helps a lot because it means that we can focus on what it is that matters, which is, spending time together as a family or doing fun things or, reading books or like whatever it is, making our kids feel as though they're growing up in a loving and warm space with parents who really enjoy their company and that sort of stuff. So once we really had our priorities set out, it's much easier to, first of all, let go of the stuff that doesn't help promote those priorities. And it's also easier to let go of the things that I might want to personally change, but they help foster that kind of feeling of belonging or being important with the kids. So it's a constant sort of juggling act between what works for everyone and what works for individuals, I find.
Oh, I like that. There's times where you have to do what's best for everyone, and then times maybe where you have to do what's best for one of the individuals in the home, and hopefully that aligns with everybody else too. But
yeah, it's constantly shifting, I find, as our kids grow up and as our priorities keep shifting as well.
Yeah, well, especially having a 3 and a 5-year-old. That's what you said, right?
Yeah, yep, that's right.
Wow, yeah, that's my daughter will be 10 in a few months, and my son turns 3 next month.
Okay,
or
next
week actually. So I can imagine.
You know where I'm coming from.
Yes, totally. So it sounds like a slow home also, when we think of productivity or getting things done or being effective or efficient and all these other buzzwords, those almost sound like slow is the opposite of that, but it feels like to me you're saying no, a slow home is one where you don't feel rushed and we are singling out our priorities so that everybody gets exactly, most of the time, what they want, and hopefully even more than that, what they need, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I have a strange relationship with the idea of productivity, to be honest, because I feel like I enjoy learning about it. I enjoy seeing how other people structure their days. Like, I love listening to your show because it gives me a glimpse into how other people make it work for them. But when I try, and I still fall into this trap even to this day, and I'm learning not to, but it's taking me a while to learn the lesson. I still try and apply these broad brushstrokes of productivity and efficiency to my life, and the way our life is structured, because I'm at home with the kids full time, they just don't fit with what I do day to day. I feel like I have to split my day in 2 almost. Like, I get up really early, and that's when I do the bulk of my work, and then during the day, that's when I'm mum full time. Mm-hmm. And then in the evenings, typically I'm so tired that I don't do much of anything after the kids are asleep. But I feel like the productivity stuff that I learn about and that I enjoy learning about is applied in, between, say, 4 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. And then the slow living priorities, focusing on the moment kind of stuff happens in the daylight hours.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and to me, so I hear you describing that, and I'm thinking, you're somebody who needs to know how to, get the most out of that limited time that you do have first thing before a different role comes up on your plate for the day, so to speak,
Exactly. Yeah. So it's really a matter of, without putting pressure on myself, maximizing what I can get done in those couple of hours first thing in the morning, and then slipping back into, my wider worldview philosophy, if you will, during the day when I'm with the kids.
So do you feel like when you're doing your, 4 a.m. to 6:30, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Man, I think you may be the earliest riser. No, there's one other person who said 3 a.m. That I don't know how consistent that was, but you're definitely close to being the earliest riser for sure.
Okay.
So the kids get up at about 6:30, or do they get up later than that?
It actually depends. Typically, my daughter will get up later than that, maybe 7 if I'm lucky. But our son, who's 3, he gets up any time from about 5. So that, those days, it's it's about being flexible for me.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going. I was thinking, even then, kids get up. Like I was up this morning at 5:30, which is I'm trying to get back into that rhythm. And my 3-year-old son came out right at 6 o'clock, and I said, "Hey," he's like, "Hey," rubbing his eyes. I said, "Would you like to lay down on the couch?" Yeah. So I just laid him back down and he fell asleep again, luckily.
Nice.
So,
but those days are just the days that you just smile at your kid.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Hey, because he can't do much. At least my daughter can kind of take care of herself a bit, but she tends to sleep in more before school. But yeah, so 4 o'clock to like 6:30, and it sounds like, with the exception of your son, you've kind of hopefully got enough of a buffer between you're finishing up your stuff and able to kind of transition into quote unquote slowing down for the day, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes it's a bit of an abrupt shift, to go from full on work mode or writing mode or whatever I've been doing into, the slow kind of intentional start to my kids' mornings. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a shock to the system.
Have you always been that early riser type person, or was that maybe something that came along after the kids?
It definitely came along after the kids. Definitely. Before we had kids, I was a real night owl. Sometimes I worked till about 10 at night with my job, and obviously I'd get home and my mind was still buzzing. So I would sometimes not get to bed until like 3 a.m. It was really unhealthy. It wasn't good for me. But I was just in that cycle of, late to bed, late to rise kind of thing. And it was after Isla was born, our daughter was born, I started to, I just needed that headspace. When you've got young kids, you just don't get it, particularly when you're with them all day, every day. So I felt this desperate need for a bit of, headspace. So that's when I started to get up early. And as we then had our son, and then he's an early riser, always has been. My waking up time just got earlier and earlier and earlier. And this year when it started, I think it was last year really, I started at 4 a.m. Like I can't actually get up any earlier than that. That's my upper limit.
Well, so as that transition kind of happened where you moved from being a night owl and being a mum and moving over to waking earlier and earlier, I assume you started to find it easier to get to bed earlier, but I wonder if, like most people, you resisted it or found yourself saying, "Oh, I need to relax for a while. I need to, watch TV, or I need to, do this or that." But did you eventually give up? Like, what's your evening ritual like?
So I did eventually give up. I was always, it was so nice when my husband got home from work. We could sit down once the kids were in bed and we might watch a TV show or, have a cup of tea or a glass of wine or something like that. And I really cherished that. But as I got sort of more into the rhythm of waking up early, I realized that I actually really did need my 7 or 8 hours of sleep. So I go to bed embarrassingly early sometimes. I have been known to go to bed with my children.
Which is about when? When is that? You can share.
Can I? Okay. 7:30, 8 o'clock.
I have done that myself.
Yeah.
So you're not alone.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, 8 o'clock is well, ideally, in an ideal world, my kids go to bed at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been in bed right after them at about 8 to 8:30 a couple of times, actually a couple times in the past month and a half or 2 months. So you're not alone.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I don't feel quite so lame. I've just realized that personally, I just need the sleep. I really do. So we typically, you asked about our sort of evening ritual. My husband doesn't get home until a little later. So the kids and I will have dinner and I'll do bath and books and bed for them. And then depending on how I'm feeling and depending on what time they actually get to sleep, I will either go and maybe read a book for half an hour or have a cup of tea or catch up on social media. That is a time that I try to avoid it, but if I haven't had a chance during the day, I will jump on and, do a bit of work on Facebook or something like that. But it'll only ever be for 10 or 15 minutes. And I always finish the night reading a book. So that's typically how I wind down.
Is it a analog book instead of digital?
I vary. It's funny, actually. I typically read fiction on my iPad, on the Kindle app on my iPad.
Okay.
Because I chew through fiction books probably one every 2 weeks. And then anything non-fiction, I'll usually have an analog book.
I've been waking a lot earlier, and there's still that feeling at night where they're asleep and I'm just thinking, oh, I have to milk this time for all that it's worth. I need to, anything I want to do, I can do now. I'm not responsible for kids. They're sleeping within reason. I can't leave the house, obviously. But then I realize, wait a second, I need the sleep. If I'm going to function tomorrow, this day is over, I'm not going to nearly enjoy anything I do right now as much as I will doing it tomorrow when I have more sleep or something like that. So actually that kind of comes back around to the putting the priority in place, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And that's still something that I battle with myself. I'm like, well, I could really use these extra 2 hours and I could work through my to-do list and I could do X, Y, and Z. And 9 times out of 10, I realize that actually, no, the sleep is going to serve me so much better in the long run. Yeah, but otherwise I might just end up watching 2 episodes of The Walking Dead.
Now, have you done the thing where, yeah, and I could never watch that at night. That would freak me out. I guess, or early in the morning, for that matter. So maybe an exception, though. Have you ever done the thing where, okay, tonight I am tired. However, if I plow through and do 2 hours of work right now, I get myself ahead or get a project pushed further down to completion, that kind of thing. Have you done that?
Yes, I definitely have. I'm just coming out of the other side of a really busy period. I had to speak at an event and a few other things that were going on at the same time. It was really, really busy, and I did that more than I normally would. Usually, if I am going to work in the evening hours, I won't do anything. I won't write. My brain just isn't in the right sort of headspace to write anything that's good. But I'll do things like maybe put together a presentation or, like I mentioned before, some social media, just things that I can then maybe tick off tomorrow's list before I go to bed. So it does, there are definitely times where I have to swing towards working more than I possibly would want to in the evening, but that holds me in much better stead the next day.
So you'll do some low energy tasks in the evening, stuff that if you do it then, it's not going to take you, it wouldn't take you half an hour to do in the morning and 2 hours at night instead. It'll still take the same amount of time no matter when you do it. So you'll take the opportunity to do it in the evening instead, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If I sat down and tried to write a post in the evening, unless I was struck with an enormous bolt of inspiration, it would be pretty lackluster and it would take me so long.
Unless it happens like as you're climbing into bed, like usually happens.
Yeah, exactly.
I did mention the whole in an ideal world question almost, so I guess I'll ask it now. We already know you get up really early, but in an ideal world, how would you start your day?
I have to say, I can't tell you how excited I am to hear you ask me that question. I've been listening to your show for ages, and I used to think, maybe one day I'll be on his show and you'll ask me that question, and then I will have made it.
Brooke, this is your chance.
Yes. Now I wish I had prepared a better answer. In an ideal world, as my life currently is, I would still get up at the same time. My children would sleep till 7:30, but if I can't control what they do, no. So in an ideal world, I'd wake up at 4. I'd get up and have not to sound too on trend, I'd have a glass of warm water with something like lemon juice in it, and I'd do 20 minutes of yoga, which I probably do half of my mornings now. And then I'd have a coffee and jump straight into my office. And I wouldn't check my emails in an ideal world. I would just get straight into writing for maybe 15 minutes, just journaling, having a bit of a brain dump. And then I would write I've actually been working with the Storyline Productivity Planner the last few weeks. I've just been experimenting with it. Yeah, it's really good.
Yes.
It's really, I'm always a bit wary of those sorts of things, but having read about the reason behind everything that's in the planner and how it helps you to structure not only your day but also your mindset for the day, it's excellent. So I take 10 minutes to fill that out for the day, and then I just jump straight into the first project that's listed on the productivity planner, and then ideally I'd have maybe 2 hours to work on that before breakfast, and then my kids would be up and I'd change hats.
That's great. So there's your answer. I think it's completely acceptable. And in fact, that some days it happens, some days it doesn't.
Exactly. Yeah. And I really want people to feel okay about that. Particularly, I feel like it's a specific set of challenges for parents who work at home to be able to structure their mornings or their days around that, because it's just so changeable. And I really want people to feel like it's okay to be flexible and to some days get more done than other days. Because I feel like there's this struggle between the productivity advice that we all hear, which is all excellent, but it doesn't necessarily apply when you've got a young family at home. So I feel like it's important for people to recognise that their challenges are just different.
That really comes across in your writing, I think, with what I've read. I think that you're very much in the, I'll use the word trenches when it comes to, I was about to use the word balancing, but I know that you've written a whole piece about, you don't really use the word balance, do you?
I don't know.
Let's go into that. Actually, let's go into that in 1 second. So you're very much in that space, that place, that context that a lot of my listeners are in. Here's the best way to put it. I had an iTunes review where a guy says, I don't know if it was a guy, but it was somebody, and they said he interviews a lot of people who are like bloggers and writers, and they have unrealistically large amounts of time on their hands, so of course they get stuff done. And I'm like, that's not true. And I know you're not that way. Like you're a blogger, and I mean, I'd even say successful blogger. I mean, you're blogging. You spoke at a conference just recently, and among other things, you've got a book out there, and yet you're still, your priorities, and that that's all good and great stuff, but your family and your home and the well-being, functioning, and even functioning well enough, maybe not, anyway, I'm rambling, but that it is a balancing act, or better yet, a tilting act. So what is tilting?
Yeah, I came across this idea a couple of years ago on Sarah Wilson's blog, actually. But it's this idea of tilting rather than balancing. And I've done quite a bit of writing on it and a lot of thinking about it over the last couple of years. So I slackline. I don't know if you know what slacklining is, but it's like a low to the ground tightrope, basically. My husband and the kids bought it for me for Mother's Day. It's 2-inch wide nylon rope that you string between two trees and you balance on it, It's really good for meditation and core strength and everything. So my goal when I'm slacklining is to just be perfectly balanced, standing still on this rope that wobbles around. And to be balanced perfectly is to be tense. It's to have every muscle in your body poised at the right, in the right position and at the right sort of tension to keep you in the middle. And I feel like when people try and balance life, work-life balance or whatever sort of balance you're trying to achieve, it's a tension that I don't necessarily think is helpful, because I really don't think that you can equally give your time and attention and energy to all areas of life at the same time. And I think it can be really damaging to try and do that. I know that's been the case for me. So rather than balance, I tend to think in things in terms of tilting. So I look at what needs my attention. And today, for example, it could be the kids. They need my attention because they're not well. So I tilt most of my energy towards spending time with them or helping them in whatever it is that they need. And I tilt away from working. Tomorrow, it could be the exact opposite. The kids might be really happy and playing amongst themselves for an hour or two, so I can tilt towards doing the things that I didn't get a chance to do before. I feel like it applies beautifully if you look at it over the long run too. I think people get so caught up in doing like the quote unquote right things all the time. But I think if you give yourself a little bit of space, you can look back over the last 6 months and say, well, over those 6 months, how do I feel about the amount of time and energy that I've given to my kids or to my spouse or to my work? And I feel like not to use the word balance, but it equals out over time when you've got your priorities aligned.
Yeah. So even to go back to the whole slackline idea, you're literally doing it. I'm thinking, and then you're applying it to a metaphor. So I'm talking about it metaphorically. Writers and words. The idea being that by focusing on balancing, you feel the tension, and so you feel the stress of balancing. But if you focus on tilting and being able to or allowing yourself to do that, you still maintain balance. In other words, you don't fall off the slack line.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
And then to take the metaphor even further of what you just said is, then you make it to the other side of a certain period of time, the other end of the line. Mm-hmm. And you didn't fall off.
Exactly.
Oh, I
feel like, yeah, and to take it a step further.
Oh.
Ooh. So what controls you on the slack line is your core. And your core, if we're looking at it in the same metaphor, your core are your priorities and your values.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. Everybody, I'm slow clapping in my head here because the mic would pick it up and it'd be kind of annoying to the listener. But that right there, I believe right now that I have just had somewhat of a perspective change here on the podcast. Hear myself as I guess I'm called the host. But here's the thing. So is there a place where, I know that I was very careful when I said get to the other end of the rope or the other end of the line to describe it as a certain period of time, because then you turn around or you do a different line or whatever. Some people would say, well, at the end of life, but that's not when you're going to look at it. You're going to look at it over almost a review period of, looking back. Do you have any kind of time period where you do that? Like, is it a week? Is it a month? All of the above?
Yeah, look, I definitely do when school holidays happen. So in Australia, we've got four school terms a year. And my daughter, actually both my kids are now in preschool for a day a week. So when they're home for the school holidays, typically I feel like that's a nice cycle in my year, and that's typically when I'll stop and think about what the previous term felt like, how things felt as a family unit, how the kids are feeling, if there's anything that's cropping up that's possibly going to be a problem. And also I'll look at my workload as well. For me, it's a nice way, it's built into it that I have to stop and be more intentional when the school holidays are here, because I just don't have the structure that I would normally have in my regular week. So I feel like I'm much more inclined to stop and look back. So that's about quarterly, let's say. And then I'm always kind of asking myself how things are going as well. And that's, for me, just a gut check, really.
Yeah. That's good. What role does your husband play in that? And also, do the kids play? I mean, I don't suppose you ask the kids, hey, so how do you think life at home's going right now?
No, because they'd respond with something like, oh, it's okay, but I really want a new toy.
Right. And then you turn to them and you say, priorities.
Exactly. Exactly, which, goes down like a lead balloon. So, my husband, he and we're really intentional about the way we're raising our kids. But the reality of the situation is that he does work really long hours at the moment. And that's something that eventually we'd like to transition away from. But for the time being, that's kind of what it's at. So he and I talk about it a lot. We talk about, how life feels and how we feel and how, we feel the kids are developing and if there's anything that we need to change. And in terms of the kids, one thing that I make sure I do every night is I will sit down and eat dinner with the kids at the dining table, obviously, but I always ask them about their day. What was your favourite part of the day? And ask both of them, and they'll always have some beautiful answer. And then what was your not so favourite part of the day? And I feel like it's a really simple, really quick little thing that I do, and I really enjoy doing it because I just love the age that my kids are at now, where they're their own little people, and we can have these lovely conversations. But it also gives me an in to discovering if there's anything amiss or anything that they feel like is lacking or anything that's upsetting to them. And I feel like if there was anything that I really needed to be tilting towards with them, those conversations help shine a light on them.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that definitely gives you the insight to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even, as we unfortunately sometimes find out, is like, oh, I've been tilting away from you or this need of yours, and suddenly you've made me aware of that. I'm going to have to make sure that I tilt back that way.
Exactly. And if kids are going to if anyone's going to call attention to areas that you're lacking, it's my kids.
Yes. That's great. So priorities, like have you gone through any kind of process? I mean, I know that you've written a lot about this, and again, the whole idea of doing the slow home and having it be just this place where you've focused in on what's essential. You've distilled things down to where you're not having an excess in areas, or at least ideally. But in order to pay attention to the most important things. But for people out there who maybe have not spent the time to do that, how would you initially suggest to them that they start to do that, to move towards more of a peaceful and I wouldn't even say peaceful is better. I would say, I don't know, what would you say? a home where it can be loud and raucous and fun, but also everybody feels safe and not rushed and feels like they belong.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it, actually. We really value our downtime. Just this past weekend, for example, we didn't get any. Typically our weekends, we'll have a slow Saturday morning, then we'll do some gardening. We might catch up with some friends in the afternoon and visit family possibly on the Sunday. But there's always a lot of downtime. We'll snuggle up on the lounge and watch a movie together. And almost every weekend you'll find us having some kind of nap, which is, lovely. It's my favorite part of the weekend. But this past weekend we didn't have that. And it just brought home the point that, we really do prioritize that time spent together as a family. And when we don't get it, I think you become more sensitive to that over time. So I think in terms of people who are wanting to start, for me, it was a process of necessity more than anything. After our second child was born, almost 4 years ago, I had really bad postnatal depression. So I went and got treatment, and the psychiatrist that I saw was a wonderful woman. I credit her with changing my perspective, which has then since changed our life. I was already making some of these sort of shifts towards simplicity, but it was that massive change in life and perspective that came from being diagnosed with depression that really had the biggest impact. So for me, it was kind of a necessity where I needed to stop and I was trying to be all things to all people and be, excellent at all of it. And in reality, I wasn't doing anything well. So it was firstly realizing that, and then just looking at what I have in life that was the most important. And for me, it was my family, and then it was my health, including my mental health, because it had been just neglected for a long time. And then it was, how do I create a life that will actually support those priorities? For me, it started out with something as simple as decluttering. And I talk about that a lot on my site, but I don't ever want people to feel like that's the one and only answer. For me, it's just like the beginning step. If you're able to clear out some of the clutter, be it mental clutter or, clutter in your calendar, if you're saying yes to too many things, too many appointments, too much extra work or responsibilities, if you're able to cut back on some of the excessive stuff that we say yes to, then it becomes clearer. I feel like it becomes clearer where you want to be putting your energies. So I think that, to me, that would be the first step that I would suggest to people, to just look at how life currently is and look at where the hot spots or the pain points are, and figure out how you can simplify those things, even just a little bit, and then work from there. And I feel like it's one of those, those puzzles, like they're in a plastic frame and there's squares and they're not in the right order, and you need to have one blank square in order to be able to move the other pieces around so that you can, create the picture. I felt like once I started to declutter and simplify our stuff and our house, that one square came out and I was able to start shifting things around. So I feel like if you can find that square, that one thing that you can start to remove, then things start to open up.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. I love that idea of pulling that square out and then being able to shift stuff around. It sounds like you're saying, that by immediately getting rid of either physical stuff or expectation, whether it's from somebody else or yourself, that can free you up, and it also maybe gives you a quick win and makes you feel like it's possible. Exactly.
Yeah, and I talk a lot about little wins as well. People come to me and they say, like, my house is just crammed full of clutter. I don't know how to start because I'm so overwhelmed. I say, well, don't try and tackle your garage today. Maybe just go and clean out your handbag or your car or your utensils drawer in the kitchen. Like, start with something really small and nail that. And then you've got a win. You're in a better position than you were yesterday. And then tomorrow you can do the same thing again.
That's great.
Yeah, and I feel like taking away those expectations of these grand changes overnight is also helpful.
So small, slow wins in your home is how it works.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, I know that we're getting kind of near the end of our time here. We've talked about simplicity and priorities and maybe rhythms. How does that work? What is your thoughts on maybe rhythms?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of rhythms, and I'm a big fan of rhythms particularly instead of routines. I feel like routines are, and I know a lot of people will just say that's just semantics, but for me, the idea of routine is that it's very rigid. It's really structured. There's times associated with each task when you're in the middle of a routine, and if you miss a step or if something takes longer than you thought it would, the routine is kind of out of whack, and that, I feel like, can add to the expectations and the pressure that we put on ourselves. So I stick to the idea of rhythm, which is, you look at your day, let's say, or your morning, and you know what needs to happen. And you know when it needs to happen by. But rather than sticking yourself in this really rigid routine, you allow the morning to unfold around this rhythm that you've set for yourself, and you'll still get everything done that needs to be done, but it gives you a flexibility. So, for example, with my morning routine, I've gone through, my morning rhythm. I've gone through what my ideal morning would look like. And let's say that stands, Once the kids get up, then it's breakfast time. We have to get ready to go out typically. So rather than have a rigid, structured routine of by 7:30 everyone will be dressed and by 8 o'clock we'll be out the door, I just look at my morning and say, well, all these things, they need to happen. So I need to make lunches, the kids need to have breakfast, we need to get dressed, make the beds, put a load of washing on or whatever. And rather than put them in a sequence and do them like that, for me and the age that my kids are, I guess, it just helps to just let the morning unfold. And the same things still happen, but it's just a much more flexible and positive way for me to structure things.
I like
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you still accomplish everything you need to. You're just not holding yourself to the pressure of having to do it the same way every time.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great. Well, Brooke, it's been awesome to talk with you. So let's tell people where they can go and they can find you online.
Yeah. So my home is Slow Your Home, slowyourhome.com. And you can find me on Twitter, which is just at Slow Your Home, and Facebook as well. I've got a Slow Your Home page there. And I also I host a decluttering group if anyone's interested in decluttering on Facebook too, which is a really beautiful, supportive group of people.
Great.
So
I'll
that's
throw
where you can find me.
links. Yeah, I'll throw links to all these in the show notes. And
Awesome.
Everybody let Brooke know how much you appreciate her being on this episode. And Brooke, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I did. I enjoyed making it. I enjoyed listening back to it. And go check out her blog over at slowyourhome.com. And I hope that you go check out MailChimp. Let them know I sent you. Go to beyondthetodolist.com/MailChimp. And as a heads up, we've got some pretty big names coming up here in the next couple of weeks. Some returning champions. I don't know if that's the right word, but I will call them champions. We've got David Allen coming back. We've got Michael Hyatt. We've got Rory Vaden. So we've got a number of awesome people and a number of awesome people lined up for the new year. So if you're not subscribed, if this is your first episode, or if you are not subscribed in any single way on your phone, on your iTunes, some people have beef with iTunes, but I use it. Go subscribe. Go pass the show on. Now is the time to let people know that this is a place to come and listen and learn how to get your stuff done so that you can have a better life. Again, thanks for listening. I'll see you next episode. Beyond the To-Do List is a proud member of the Noodle.mx Network. Find more of our award-winning and award-nominated podcasts to make you think, laugh, and succeed at Noodle.mx. Learn how to podcast. Theorize over the TV shows Once Upon a Time in Wonderland, and Under the Dome. Laugh with our clean comedy. Delve into science fiction and philosophy. Learn critical thinking from movie reviews. And more at Noodle.mx.